Hello everyone. The first image guiding this reading is the Three of Pentacles reversed, and psychologically, this card speaks to what has been missing. Structure, cooperation, and a shared plan. That is why his energy feels different now. He is no longer satisfied with a connection that survives on chemistry alone. He has realized that attraction without direction becomes confusion, and confusion is no longer enough. Something inside him has crossed a line. He is not thinking about one evening with you. He is not imagining a temporary arrangement. He is thinking about whether the two of you could build something that still exists years from now. But here is the part he has not revealed. Before he approaches you, he is examining weak points in the connection. The misunderstandings, the inconsistent communication, the moments when pride replaced honesty. The times when both of you may have felt something meaningful, yet no one gave it a proper name. The reversed Three of Pentacles becomes a mirror for all of that, not a prediction. A symbol of two people with potential, but no stability until they stop working from separate plans. He understands that wanting you is not enough. He has to show that he can communicate, cooperate, and remain present when the connection becomes real. For many of you, this man once believed he could control the pace. He may have stayed busy, acted casual, or allowed silence to do the talking. But distance has taught him something uncomfortable. If he keeps behaving as though you are optional, you may eventually believe him. That thought has changed his next move. He wants to return with more than emotion. He wants a plan. A clear conversation, a serious offer, and a willingness to build beside you instead of expecting you to fit into a life he designed alone. The message becomes deeper. He is beginning to picture partnership as a daily practice. Two people making decisions together. Two people repairing problems instead of disappearing. Two people creating a home that feels safe because both voices matter. Yet, one question still unsettles him. Has he waited so long to become serious that you no longer trust what he might offer? That fear is becoming the pressure that pushes him toward action. Because the next card will reveal what forever looks like in his mind, and what he may already be preparing to change. The Empress upright becomes the next image, and psychologically this card reveals that his idea of forever is no longer centered only on desire. It is centered on growth, on care, on creating a life that becomes fuller because both people are protecting what they have built. He is beginning to see you as someone who could bring warmth into the parts of his life that have remained functional, but emotionally empty. Not because he expects you to rescue him, not because he wants you to carry the relationship alone, but because your presence has shown him the difference between having a life that looks complete and having one that actually feels alive. For some of you, he is imagining very ordinary moments. You moving comfortably through his space. The two of you preparing food after a long day. Your voice becoming part of decisions he once made without consulting anyone. A home where affection is not saved for special occasions. A relationship where care is visible in the smallest details. He may be thinking about family, traditions, financial security. The kind of environment the two of you could create together. A place where neither person has to question whether they belong. This is what makes the Empress different from temporary attraction. Attraction asks how strongly two people affect each other. The Empress asks what can grow from that feeling. Can the connection become safe? Can it become generous? Can both people feel supported without one person constantly giving more? Can love remain present when life becomes repetitive, demanding, or uncertain? He is no longer thinking only about how exciting it feels to be near you. He is thinking about what your presence changes, how you make him consider patience, responsibility, consistency, the future consequences of the choices he makes now. And the reversed Three of Pentacles still matters here. Because nothing can grow in an environment where two people are working from separate intentions. He understands that he cannot imagine you as part of his future while treating you like an uncertain part of his present. He cannot want the comfort of your love without helping create the structure that protects it. The Empress represents something that must be nurtured, not assumed, not postponed, not neglected until it begins to disappear. He wants you to feel valued before you have to ask, included before you begin to withdraw, chosen before uncertainty teaches you to stop hoping. And this vision did not arrive randomly. Something recently made him notice that your energy was no longer waiting in the same way. For the first time, he was forced to imagine what his life would feel like if the warmth he associated with you was no longer available to him. The world reversed becomes the next image, and psychologically, this card represents an unfinished cycle that can no longer be ignored. Something between you never reached a true conclusion. It may have slowed down, become inconsistent, or disappeared beneath silence, but it did not feel complete. For some of you, his wake-up call came when you stopped trying to repair the distance for him. You became quieter, less available, so less willing to interpret mixed signals as hidden devotion. For others, this may have happened when he saw you moving forward with your own life. Not necessarily with another person, simply without needing his attention to feel secure. That change forced him to notice what his old behavior had created. He may have believed there would always be another conversation, another opportunity, another moment when the connection could begin again without anyone addressing why it stopped. But the world reversed exposes the danger of that thinking. A connection cannot remain unfinished forever without eventually becoming a missed opportunity. He is reviewing the moments when he could have been direct, but chose comfort instead. The times when pride kept him silent. The occasions when he expected you to understand feelings he refused to explain. The inconsistencies he minimized because he assumed the bond was strong enough to survive them. This is not being romanticized. He knows that caring privately does not erase the effect of behaving carelessly. And what he feels now is deeper than missing your attention. Attention could soothe him temporarily. What unsettles him is the possibility that the future he imagined with you may no longer be available because he failed to build toward it when he had the chance. The Empress showed him what could grow. The world reversed shows him what remains incomplete because growth was delayed. He can picture the warmth, the home, the partnership. But he also has to face the distance between that vision and what he has actually offered. That is where accountability begins. Not with saying that he was confused, not with claiming that the timing was wrong, but with recognizing that avoidance became a decision each time he chose it again. He understands that if he returns, he cannot simply continue the connection from where it paused. Something has to be completed. The old pattern, the undefined role, the expectation that you will remain emotionally present while he decides when to become serious. And this realization is beginning to affect more than his thoughts. He may already be closing distractions, reconsidering commitments, changing routines that kept him emotionally unavailable. Because before he approaches you, he wants to remove the parts of his life that would make his promise impossible to keep. The Seven of Swords reversed becomes the next image, and psychologically, this card speaks to the end of avoidance. He is beginning to understand that he cannot prepare for a serious relationship while continuing to hide behind old habits. The convenient excuses, the half-truths, the conversations he postponed because honesty would have required him to become vulnerable. For some of you, what he is reorganizing may not be visible yet. It may involve stepping away from distractions that allowed him to remain emotionally divided. Reducing contact with people who kept him connected to a version of himself that did not want responsibility. Changing a schedule that always gave him a reason to be unavailable. looking more carefully at money, work, or living arrangements because he knows that a real partnership needs room to exist. But the deeper preparation is internal. He is trying to become someone whose actions do not contradict his words. Someone who does not ask for trust while withholding information. Someone who does not promise consistency and then disappear when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. The Seven of Swords reversed does not erase what happened. It exposes it. He may be reviewing the ways he controlled what you were allowed to know. How much he revealed, when he responded, whether he admitted that the connection mattered. He may have convinced himself that staying guarded protected both of you. But now he sees that secrecy created instability. Silence allowed you to form conclusions he never had the courage to correct. And if he approaches you again, he knows that a dramatic confession will not be enough. You may listen to what he says, but you will also notice what has changed. His availability, his follow-through. The way he handles difficult questions, the way he behaves after the emotional intensity of the conversation has passed. That is the difference between performance and reliability. Performance appears when the fear of losing you becomes strong. Reliability remains after that fear settles down. His current silence may partly reflect an attempt to put certain things in order. But preparation cannot become another excuse. He cannot disappear for an indefinite amount of time and expect you to interpret the absence as devotion. At some point, the work he claims to be doing has to become visible. Through honesty, through consistency, through a decision that does not leave you guessing, he wants to arrive with fewer contradictions, a clearer life, a clearer intention, and nothing important still hidden behind him. But even if he becomes ready to offer something stable, one question remains. Will you recognize the change as real? Or will it look like another temporary reaction from someone who only becomes serious when he feels you slipping away? The Ten of Wands reversed becomes the next image, and psychologically, this card speaks to the point where carrying uncertainty becomes too heavy. You may still care. You may still wonder what could happen if he finally becomes honest. But that does not mean you are willing to keep holding the entire emotional weight of the connection. For some of you, this is what he is beginning to sense. You are no longer available for affection that arrives without direction, for explanations that come after the damage, for closeness that asks you to feel everything while receiving very little certainty in return. The Ten of Wands reversed suggests that something has been put down, not necessarily the connection itself, but the responsibility of keeping it alive alone. You may have stopped initiating, stopped making excuses for the silence, stopped carrying the hope, the patience, and the emotional understanding for both people. And your boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. A response to what became exhausting. A recognition that love cannot remain healthy when one person is always waiting for the other to become ready. He may understand this more clearly now. That is why his fear is not only that you will reject him. It is that you will listen calmly and no longer feel responsible for making his confession easier. Will you hear him out? Will you question why clarity arrived only after you began pulling away? Will you ask what has changed beyond the intensity of the moment? Will his actions survive your attention once you stop filling in the missing pieces for him? This is where preparation hidden from view becomes insufficient. He may have been changing habits, removing distractions, thinking seriously about stability. But you cannot trust what you have never been allowed to see. Consistency has to become observable. Not for one day, not only during the conversation, but in the ordinary moments that follow. The Ten of Wands reversed also shows that he cannot approach you expecting immediate relief from his guilt. You are not responsible for reassuring him that he has arrived in time. You are not required to accept a future simply because he has finally imagined one. He will have to respect your caution, your questions, your need to watch what happens next. And this may be the first time he understands that your discernment is not an obstacle to love. It is the standard love must now meet. But the next image changes the message again. Because he may be preparing to tell you that the burden he carried was not indifference. It was something he worked very hard to keep concealed. The Ace of Wands reversed becomes the next image. And psychologically, this card speaks to desire that was repeatedly restrained. Not absent, not weak, but prevented from becoming action. For some of you, this is what he has concealed. The connection affected him more deeply than his behavior suggested. Yet every time the desire to move closer became strong, something inside him pulled back. Fear, pride, the need to remain in control. The concern that once he admitted what he wanted, he would no longer be able to pretend the outcome did not matter. He may have used busyness to delay the conversation, humor to reduce the seriousness of certain moments, silence to avoid revealing how closely he was watching your reactions, mixed signals to keep the connection near without allowing it to become defined, and controlled communication to make sure you never knew exactly how much emotional power you had. But the Ace of Wands reversed shows the cost of that strategy. Desire without expression becomes frustration. Intention without movement becomes another form of avoidance. And feelings that are constantly restrained do not disappear. They turn into tension, regret, and the growing awareness that an opportunity may be closing. His hidden truth may not simply be that he cares about you. You may already suspect that. The deeper truth is that he has been considering you in permanent terms while behaving as though the connection required no decision. He may have imagined what it would be like to build with you, to include you, to create a future where your presence was no longer uncertain. Yet he continued to act as though naming the relationship would create more risk than leaving it undefined. Now he understands that the opposite happened. His attempt to avoid rejection created distance. His attempt to preserve control damaged trust. His attempt to keep the connection available without committing to it taught you how to live without depending on it. That is why your caution matters. You did not become guarded without a reason. Every unanswered question added weight. Every delayed conversation gave you another reason to protect yourself. And he may finally be ready to admit that what looked like indifference was often hesitation. What looked casual was sometimes carefully controlled. What looked like a lack of desire was a fear of what that desire would require from him. But admitting this will not be enough. You do not need another explanation that leaves the relationship in the same position. The next energy demands clarity. He will have to name exactly what he wants. Not imply it, not suggest it. Not wait for you to make the confession safer. And once he says it clearly, he will also have to accept whatever answer you are ready to give. The Two of Swords reversed becomes the next. And psychologically, this card represents a decision that can no longer be postponed. He has spent enough time standing between two positions, wanting closeness, but protecting his independence. Imagining commitment, but avoiding the conversation that would make commitment real. Hoping you would remain available, while refusing to give you a clear reason to stay. That position is becoming impossible to maintain. The Two of Swords reversed shows what happens when avoidance stops creating peace. The questions return, the contradictions become louder, and the choice someone refused to make begins making itself through distance. He understands that he cannot approach you with another vague message. He cannot say that he misses you and expect that to answer what you need to know. He cannot speak about feelings while avoiding the structure those feelings require. The conversation has to become clear. Clear about why he remained silent. Clear about what changed. Clear about the kind of relationship he is asking you to consider. For some of you, he may need to acknowledge that he benefited from the ambiguity. It allowed him to receive emotional closeness without accepting the full responsibility of partnership. It allowed him to keep possibilities open, to delay difficult decisions, to tell himself that nothing had truly been promised, even when his behavior encouraged you to hope. But honesty requires him to admit the effect of that choice, not only what he intended, what you experienced. The confusion, the waiting, the moments when you questioned whether the connection was real or whether you had simply given meaning to something he refused to define. An emotional speech cannot repair that by itself. A fair offer must include more than intensity. It must include truth, time, choice, and evidence. He has to allow you to ask questions without becoming defensive. He has to give you room to say that you are not ready, that you need distance. That consistency must come before trust. He may not receive the answer he wants immediately, and accepting that consequence is part of becoming serious. Because accountability is not an apology designed to secure forgiveness. It is the willingness to tell the truth, even when the truth does not guarantee access to you. The Two of Swords reversed suggests that he is finally prepared to stop protecting himself with uncertainty. He would rather hear a difficult answer than continue living inside an unfinished question. And once everything has been placed on the table, his intention is to become unmistakable. Not an invitation to spend one evening together. Not a casual return to see where things go. Not another connection without a name. He is preparing to ask for something defined, something mutual, something built to remain. The Five of Swords reversed becomes the next image. And psychologically, this card represents the decision to stop treating love like a contest. No more trying to appear less affected. No more protecting pride at the expense of connection. No more allowing both people to lose, simply because neither person wanted to be the first to become vulnerable. He is beginning to understand that a lasting relationship cannot be built around winning. Who reaches out first? Who cares less? Who has more control? Who can remain silent the longest without admitting that the distance hurts? Those patterns may have helped him feel protected, but they did not bring him closer to you. They created tension where there should have been cooperation, defensiveness where there should have been honesty, and emotional separation where there could have been partnership. The Five of Swords reversed suggests that his serious offer may begin with repair, not a dramatic promise designed to make the past disappear. A willingness to stop repeating the behavior that created the damage. He may want exclusivity, a relationship with a clear name, a future that includes meeting the people who matter to both of you, plans that extend beyond the next conversation. For some of you, he may even be thinking about marriage as a genuine direction, not necessarily an immediate proposal, but a relationship entered with the intention to build toward permanence rather than remain uncertain indefinitely. That is the difference now. He is not asking whether the two of you can reconnect temporarily. He is asking whether the connection can become mutual, acknowledged, protected, something neither person has to hide, minimize, or explain away. But before he can ask for that future, he may need to lower the defenses that shaped the past, to admit where pride became cruelty, where silence became punishment, where trying to avoid feeling powerless made you feel unimportant. An apology matters here, but only if it is followed by a different pattern, only if he can stop turning every difficult conversation into a struggle over who is right, only if he can understand that partnership requires two people to protect the relationship, not their separate positions inside it. He wants peace with you, but not the temporary peace created by avoiding hard subjects. The deeper kind. The kind that comes when both people know where they stand, what they are building, and what will happen when conflict returns. Because conflict will return. The final test is whether he can stay emotionally present when you ask what he most fears answering. Why did it take losing access to you for him to finally choose you clearly? The Ten of Pentacles upright becomes the next image, and psychologically, this card answers that question through permanence rather than persuasion. He cannot prove that he has changed by speaking more intensely. He has to prove it by becoming someone whose choices still make sense months from now, years from now, when the fear of losing you is no longer creating urgency. That is the challenge in front of him. You may ask why now, why he waited, what has actually changed, how you can trust a future offered by someone who once left the present undefined. And the Ten of Pentacles suggests that his strongest answer cannot be a perfect explanation. It has to be a pattern. He stays when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. He listens when your feelings do not make him feel forgiven. He does not rush you toward reassurance. He does not use a vision of marriage, family, or a shared home to avoid discussing the choices that damage trust. He allows the questions. He accepts the discomfort. And he understands that your hesitation does not mean the connection has failed. It means the connection is finally being treated seriously. For some of you, he may speak about building something stable, combining lives carefully, making financial decisions with a shared future in mind, creating traditions, becoming part of each other's families, establishing a home where neither person feels temporary. But those images only matter if he can support them emotionally. A lasting partnership cannot survive on future plans while present problems remain untouched. It requires honesty during conflict, responsibility after mistakes, and the ability to remain consistent when love becomes ordinary. This is where his surrender of control becomes important. He may tell you what he wants, but he cannot control how quickly you believe him. He may offer commitment, but he cannot decide when you feel safe enough to receive it. He may be ready now, but he has to respect that your readiness developed under different circumstances. That acceptance may be the clearest evidence that he is no longer playing games, because games require control. They require someone to win, someone to pursue, someone to remain uncertain. But this energy is moving towards something else. Two people with equal voices. Two people making decisions that protect more than the emotion of the moment. Two people choosing a future without pretending the past did not happen. The Ten of Pentacles does not describe a temporary reunion. It describes the responsibility of building something meant to last. And the final image will reveal whether that foundation can become a connection where both of you choose truth over fear. The Six of Wands reversed becomes the final image. And psychologically, this card reveals that the connection cannot be completed through performance. He may want to prove that he has changed, to arrive with confidence, to say the right things, to finally be seen as the man who understood what was at stake. But this card removes the need for applause, because commitment is not about appearing victorious. It is not about winning you back so he can feel chosen again. It is about whether he can build something meaningful when no one else is watching. For some of you, he once cared too much about how vulnerable he appeared. He wanted to maintain control, to avoid looking rejected, to keep his feelings hidden until he felt certain they would be returned. But love cannot become mutual when one person is always protecting their image. The Six of Wands reversed asks him to approach without expecting praise for finally doing what the connection required. Honesty, consistency, accountability, a clear intention. He may have imagined that one serious conversation would change everything, but now he understands that the real proof will come afterward. In how he communicates when the moment is no longer dramatic, in whether he continues to include you when life becomes busy, in whether he repairs misunderstandings before pride creates another distance, in whether his offer remains stable even when you need time to trust it. And your choice matters equally. His realization does not create an obligation for you. His vision of forever does not replace your standards. You are allowed to observe, to question, to decide whether his actions create emotional safety. Because a future cannot be built from one person's certainty alone. It requires two people who are willing to name what they want. Two people who understand what went wrong. Two people who choose cooperation over control. That is why this is not simply a date. A date asks whether the feeling is still there. This conversation asks whether the two of you can live differently because of it. And this is not another situationship. A situationship survives through implication. This requires definition, mutual responsibility, a place for both people to stand. He is no longer approaching to see whether he can still affect you. He is approaching to discover whether trust can be rebuilt through action, whether affection can become partnership, whether the future he imagined can be created by two people choosing it together. Not because the past was perfect, because the pattern can change. Not because he wants access, because he wants responsibility. Not because he fears being alone, because he understands what it means to choose you, clearly, consistently, and with intention.